everybody. You're listening to Trace Elements Radio live today, Revolution Radio Studio A, and of course Trace Elements Radio, where I have posted some new articles today, and if you get a chance, you probably want to take a look over there. We have a lot of news because Uncle Sam's secret sorcerers are making their big move. Not just in one country. And I realize some people want me to talk about September 11th. There's a lot going on, so let me just say about this. That was the day that the laws of physics were suspended in favor of a story that told people that there's a group that hated you for their freedom so much that they attacked the center of American power, even though they ignored the Israelis, the colonist Israelis, who sold their interests and moved out a week before. In the UK, my brothers and sisters in the UK right now, police state, anyone? Prime Minister May's surveillance bill is the most chilling human rights nightmare I have heard on planet Earth, and that's a big thing. That's a huge thing, because we have been with perpetual war, perpetual terror, and false flags that, they work. Long and short of it, they work. They've always worked. They will continue to work, because people don't really look into things. And no matter how clumsy an American style false flag is compared to other ones, that's why I don't think it was American run 9/11. It might have been their idea, absolutely not American one, because we've seen what Americans do for false flags. Messy, sloppy. They're not the Rico Suaves of the old world. And false flags have succeeded consistently against audiences around the world for millennia. They compel war. They still work. Now, last week, Pope Francis, church officials, encouraged everyone to consume less and think more about our impact on the environment as he sits in his gold chair. But it is a timely warning, because the next 6 months will be critical to the future of us. I almost said planet Earth, but she will be fine. We doesn't look like it, because ahead of a series of major events this year, the Foundation for Deep Ecology and Popular Media Center released a collection that illustrates the devastating effects of the out-of-control growth, out-of-control waste, and it's breathtaking. That's why it's really important, the movement that the natives are doing on this continent right now. Because this is an issue that people need to care about. It's not mentioned enough in mainstream media or alternative media, as far as I'm concerned, because it's difficult to always know the impacts of our daily choices. So again, when we want to look at who to blame, we need to look at our daily choices, because the real effect of buying a bottled water or an extra TV or laptop is huge. Because with more than 220,000 more people on the planet every single day, the average person is generating 4 pounds of waste a day. An almost 60% increase since 1960. The impact of that growth and change of behavior is rarely seen like this. And if you can get over to my page, please do, because there's pictures. You can see the laptops in the pile. Electric waste from around the world is shipped to Ghana, who we are basically strangling right now, where locals break apart electronics for minerals or burn them. Mexico City, Mexico, one of the most populous cities in the Western Hemisphere. Take a look at that. New Delhi, India, where landfills are reaching a breaking point. The surrounding population of Delhi totals some 25 million people. Los Angeles, California, which is famous for sometimes having more cars than people, and apparently no trees or grass or animals. Ken River oil field, California, USA. Former old growth forest, leveled, devastated for a reservoir development. Willamette, I think, National Forest, Oregon, for the Population Media Center. Coal power plant, United Kingdom. Look at it. And by the way, in Canada, Toronto, as a matter of fact, we stopped using coal in the city. Toronto. The very next year, we had no warnings for breathing or pollution in the air. Just by doing that. So I'll go on. Northeast Land, Norway, where the rising global temperatures are fundamentally changing the ecology of the entire world. We're past the tipping point now. We have 6 months. Scientists all around the world are saying this. Listen or don't. The world's largest diamond mine, Russia. A great big pit. The Amazon jungle burns to make room for grazing cattle. This is Brazil. Who had ancient trees, who had things that we never discovered, who had healing properties in their plants that we will never find because they're gone now. They're gone. Tar sands. Open pit mining in areas so vast it can be seen from space. This is Alberta, Canada. Tires discarded in Nevada that go on for a mile. Vancouver Island, Canada, which there's a big deal, I guess. Prince and Princess are coming over here. West Coast, Canada, to unceded land, so our media can talk about how they're visiting and ignore the fact there's protests going on all over Canada because the land is unceded, which means we did not give it to you, we did not lend it. It is not disputed who that land belongs to. As much as land belongs to everyone, because we need to get that right too. The land does not belong to us. We belong to it. Been here longer than us, will be here longer than us. Now, continuing. Industrial agriculture in Elmar, Spain, stretches for miles. I've shown you this one before, where you won't see a tree or plant other than in these rows, the specific ones they want to grow. Again, tar sands, Alberta. Another one, man turning away from the smell of the Yellow River in China. Bangladesh, where much of the world's clothing and goods are manufactured. Those people locked in cages so they won't kill themselves like the Chinese. Black Friday, Boise, Idaho. People acting like idiots. A remote bay, Indonesia, where local residents, without any infrastructure for waste disposal, discard waste directly into streams, directly into rivers. The rest of the year is going to be critical. In September, world leaders are trying to agree on something sustainable, a development goal that will take us through the next 15 years, maybe. December in Paris, United Nations will attempt to finally set binding limits on pollution. This year will dictate how we address our degrading planet over the next few decades. Whether we're going to have eco-tours going to the dying corals all around the world. They're not going to die, they are dying now. The Population Media Center and partners hope these pictures will generate awareness and action, because as the word spreads, so does the will to make sure we never see anything like this again. And we need to never see anything like this again. We really, really do. Lessons. Because we are being taught some lessons right now. Many celebrated, myself included, the decision of 3 government agencies this past Friday in opposition to the ruling of a federal judge, the Dakota Access. Cease building the Bracken pipeline until reviews can be made of the Army Corps' construction plans. So in an effort to block the pipeline's path, the largest gathering of Native people in the United States, actually on Turtle Island, at least in decades, hundreds of years, has been occurring near Standing Rock Reservation since April 1st, by the way. Only recently has their resistance been receiving any attention outside Indigenous activist circles. This is due in a large part to the escalation in militant tactics. If you call this militant, the Lakota protesters have chained themselves to bulldozers of late, broken the ranks of corporate security to interrupt the desecration of sacred lands, halting construction on multiple occasions, long before the official statement from the DOJ. But you have to. It must be done. Because Native organizers have reminded us over the weekend that this is not the end of the fight to stop this pipeline. As powers attempt to slow momentum, redirect action, and attention away from the project's completion, it becomes all the more critical that the oppressed communities maintain our focus on the Native protectors, still risking their lives to secure water, land, sovereignty over their own lands. We must continue to follow their lead, demand the pipeline's construction be terminated, not paused, but ended. A true revolution is in the works in North Dakota, being led by Native communities. It has a radical implications for all oppressed peoples as we continue to learn how to fight back against the interlocking bodies, undoing our communities, denying our most basic resources. Since the struggle is ongoing, here are 4 critical lessons I think non-native people can learn from native organizing as it continues. Anti-colonialism is the core of environmental justice on this planet, wherever you live. The rhetoric of the white liberals and their leaders of mainstream environmental movement has long assisted, or at least asserted, that fighting the destruction of the natural world is the only true uniting political issue. Racism, class division, gender, sexual expression are diverse. It is claimed because they do not affect all people at the same time, nor are they equal. We all live on the same planet. We all share the same natural resources, so protecting the environment should take precedent over other, less universal problems. Now, the underlying implication of such beliefs is that the legacy of slavery, colonialism, capitalism aren't as important or immediate as the environmental crisis we face right now on this planet. Yet what Standing Rock does teach us is that a movement for environmental justice which fails to prioritize all of these neither understands who actually faces the crisis, nor can it effectively rely on their perspectives in combating it. That environmental injustice impacts all communities equally is not, nor has it ever been, true. This realization is an important opportunity for solidarity between Black, Brown, Native communities, for sure. For examples abound across all of them. Hurricane Katrina, water crisis in Flint, the dump of guns that happened in Chicago. It was not an accident that people killed each other on a huge rate over a weekend. The continued use of Puerto Rico as a dumping ground for the U.S. toxic waste, the food deserts that leave the poor people of color with nothing to eat, but tainted byproducts of failed agribusiness ventures. Class, race, gender, culture are the best predictors of who will have to suffer the damage of the unnatural disasters when they occur, and who will have the resources to bounce back from them or avoid them altogether. Now, believing the environmental crisis can be treated as a higher priority doesn't just fail to grasp the nature of those crises and who they threaten. It ignores the fact that the same historical systems of domination, imperialism, slavery, militarization, colonialism, has led to the blight of this late capitalism, the imminent destruction of our planet, because this is where we are now. Not only does it stop us from tackling any environmental justice through a more, potently nuanced lens, I guess, it shuts out the voices of the most impacted by this violence, this environmental violence. Poor people, working people, black people, women, Native. The very voices that are needed to effectively end this environmental terror. There is a reason Indigenous communities are leading this current charge. It's not a coincidence that one of the most coordinated responses to climate change in decades is also a militant response to settler colonization. The most radical shifts are made possible when the most marginalized voices are centered and working together and once again united. Because we must all listen, or learn to listen to the Native voices if they are to effectively combat the devastation on this planet, protect the few natural resources we have left. Native organizers, Kelly Hayes, speaks brilliantly to the differences between media coverage of police violence against blacks and Native communities. Whereas murders of black people by the state are regularly made into a spectacle with violent images, disturbing footage, relentlessly circulated, there is often no such coverage, no such discussion of Native murders by police, even though they happen at a proportionately higher rate to anyone else, anywhere else. Hayes argues this is because the historical reasons for state violence against these two communities remain unchanged, unaltered. The lynchings of black people must be held up as example, a tactic designed to intimidate black communities into staying in their place. The lynchings of Natives cannot be held up in the same way because Natives are supposed to have disappeared. So it's ignored, right? In order for the state to claim access to their lands, Indigenous people must evaporate into national memory, cease to exist beyond historical caricatures. Both are genocide, but with different end goals: political, economic subjugation of one community and the complete erasure of another. This history has been exemplified by the media blackout over Standing Rock demonstrations, as beautiful marches and shutdowns have transpired. So have violent responses from police and Dakota Access, virtually none of which have been covered by mainstream media. After a tribal member was cut out from a blockade with a non-precision saw, an act that could have resulted in death, or at least injury, miles from any hospital. Hayes wrote a public statement reminding all non-Native allies that whenever we stop paying attention to the struggles of Native communities, even for a moment, Native people die. They don't get hurt, they're killed. While many of us are fighting to heal from violence without seeing it turn into a racist media circus, Native people are fighting to be included into a narrative of state suppression that purposely leaves them out. In the same way that we are tired of state violence in black and brown communities being used to shame and demoralize us, we also refuse to allow the erasure of state violence against Native communities to disappear and silence them. Keeping our eyes on Standing Rock is about making sure our people fighting there are not lost between or underneath any false promises of federal governments, and that the demands of Native people continue to be lifted up after the pipeline has been stopped. Last weekend, when Dakota Access sent its own private security to sick dogs and tear gas on Native protectors, social media posts exposed the violence while corporate networks were silent. Even more telling, live streams and other on-the-ground documentation showed police standing by to guard the pipeline, doing nothing as at least 6 protectors, one of them a pregnant woman, were bitten and toppled by dogs. A week earlier, as the Standing Rock encampment began to grow in numbers, North Dakota's Director of Homeland Security was called in to remove the state-owned water tanks from the sites in hopes of squelching this rebellion. Just this past Thursday, last week, the National Guard was activated in North Dakota in anticipation of the response to Friday's court ruling. From its inception, the No DAPL struggle has been a case study in not only how the police and the military exist to defend the state from the poor and Native communities, but also to protect corporate property, even as it ushers in another environmental catastrophe. Police and prisons don't only exist to shield the property of the wealthy, but to maintain the balance, the deep imbalances resulting from amassing of this property. This includes imbalances in the natural world, ones made more extreme by projects like the Bracken pipeline. If the current order is climate change, pollution, privatization of natural resources, then the police system works to keep these evils in place, just as mass incarceration, poverty, criminalization of oppressed peoples fighting for their survival works. When we defund, which I think is the only way, prisons and police departments, we start to fund sustainable farming, clean water, green spaces in our neighborhood instead. When we say we want stolen resources returned, we mean corporate profits must be given back to the oppressed communities. Stolen lands must be given back to the indigenous people because no one else knows what to do with them. Look at this planet. If people were all the same, we'd live in peace, the waters would be clean, the lands would be okay. They are not. Indigenous people on this land know how to take care of it. We have aliens running countries everywhere in the world. And by aliens, I mean people who aren't from there. May have been born there, but they have no deep roots, or they wouldn't be able to sign the things that are coming into law. Ending the disparities in public funding is about ending the corporate-sponsored violence against our communities, against our planet. Ending the police would be good for the earth, because they were started as slave catchers, and that's it. They still are. We don't need to travel in order to be in solidarity either. The swelling awareness of the standoff between the Lakota and Dakota Access has led to an outpouring of support, primarily from other Native tribes and communities. Over 2,000, the numbers seem to change daily. Indigenous people representing 100 nations from Turtle Island alone have shown up, although natives from around the world are coming in solidarity to block this pipeline with the Lakota Sioux. The Sioux, by the way, are being represented by all 7 fires, and this hasn't happened since the American Indian Wars. They're standing together. For the first time since 1876, it's the Battle of Little Bighorn. All 7 of the council fires of the Great Sioux Nation, the Osete Sakowin, I think I said it right, Great Sioux Nation, their real name. Sioux is not their name, by the way. They're camped together at Standing Rock. This has not happened since 1876. Simultaneously, powerful solidarity actions have sprung up across and around the U.S., linking the No DPL hashtag with Indigenous struggles across the country, including those of displaced Palestinians and other immigrant communities. The Black Lives Matter Network released a public statement in alliance with the Standing Rock, and actually came last week, as a matter of fact, maybe 2 weeks ago. A faction of 50 black organizers traveled to the encampment to stand in solidarity with them. The increasing number of people at Standing Rock have been crucial for generating a national attention. No DAPL is a reminder that no matter where we are fighting, we are on stolen land. We do not have to travel to be in solidarity with Native people. If you're here, you're on stolen land. Period. We need to protect Native land and resources, because they exist in every city, every community, on every hemisphere. Perhaps the greatest form of solidarity is adopting of environmental justice framework into the work that we are already doing in our own cities, in our own neighborhoods, remembering that every time we fight for clean water, green space, sustainable grown food, we are following the example of these native protectors, actively struggling for indigenous resources, remembering whose land you stand on, whose resources we must defend and are defending, who are our common enemies, even when the manifestations of our oppression are different, or at least oppressed, or presented differently. It's the next step for Native and non-Native solidarity. It is the only step. Not saying that we are the same, we are struggling the same, because we are not. Native numbers, how they are being killed, is not reported. So it is not the same. You are not going through the same thing as Native people. You are not. And if you don't look Native, and if you're 1/4 Native, you are not going through the same thing. You're not. The struggles for environmental justice are deeply rooted in anti-colonialism and the absolution of completely ending capitalism, naming natives as victims of state violence, of environmental injustice, undergoes and undoes the empire's attempts to make us believe we are alone in this fight, that our indigenous family isn't still here fighting along with us. They are. They have not given up. Everything has been put against them. Absolutely everything. They should not be alive, but they are. We are not the same as them. Stand with your brothers. Don't belittle them by thinking you're going through the same thing, because you're not. And for the Indigenous activists that are fighting the pipelines across Canada, the following names are unforgettable: Energy East, Enbridge Northern Gateway, Trans Mountain Expansion. The struggle to stop these projects have been carved forever into our memories. But it was last Monday, something I thought was kind of cool. It's been carved into the journey of a wooden totem pole that traveled more than 8,000 kilometers from the Numi Nation in Bellingham, Washington, to the heart of Treaty 1 territory in Winnipeg. The totem pole measures 22 feet in length, made stops along the way at various Indigenous-led movements along the fossil fuel expansion in North America, because the fossil fuel expansion is happening not in the suburbs, not in the cities, but across native territory. But anyway, with the goal of recruiting more partners in the climate change battle, strengthening alliances between Indigenous communities, advocacy groups, community leaders that support the cause. Today, precisely 1 week after the conclusion of the incredible journey, First Nations leaders in Canada say that the initiative has been incredibly effective. Indigenous people across North America are sharing a newfound, unprecedented unity when it comes to protecting their culture and their livelihood and their sovereignty. As much as they've been torn apart and made to hate each other, yes, they have, inside communities. There is a change happening. There's a solidarity. There is a convergence, if you will, going on this continent that I didn't see it coming. You know, when Two Dog and I started talking about what was happening here with Idle No More, this is bigger. This is joining. This is people with clear eyes and vision joining together and realizing what I've been telling you. This isn't something that we can sit back on our thumbs on. This isn't something that we can blame other people for. We need to deal with this planet now. The inequalities need to be dealt with now. Canadian government is tearing up this planet with their mining. It needs to be stopped. American government is pretty much sending your boys and girls to shoot everything they can. Sending the girls now just as much as the boys, because I guess they don't have enough women to rape, because that's what happens if you're in the military now. You'll be raped. That will happen. So it's just the tip of the iceberg of the sickness that we are dealing with. So I share excitement that helps heal the relative horror of what's going on right now. The solidarity of the Indigenous peoples when it comes to protecting their culture and their livelihood and their sovereignty, It's generating powerful and influential force that is suddenly impacting the future of every major resource project across this continent, beyond. I'm hoping. Because it's unprecedented in the United States and Canada, really across the world at this moment. One of the Stop It at the Source campaigners for the 350.org and a member of Manitoba's Treaty 6, Matthias Gullum Cree Nation, Thomas Mueller, yep, that's his name, and we know why, helped bring thousands of people together in Winnipeg last week to welcome the totem pole to its final resting place by the home of a respected elder at Turtle Lodge in Fort Alexander, Manitoba. And it's actually quite beautiful. I think I put pictures up. It's gorgeous. Anyway, when we did some of the biggest protests ever in history of the climate movement in relationship to Keystone XL tar sands pipeline. Yes, and if you don't believe the climate is changing, you should hang up. Also, I think you're an idiot. Moving on. It set up a circumstance that we have today, where Indigenous people are the leaders of this new climate movement, standing there in the front lines with other communities of color, challenging power in a really beautiful way. Indigenous activism in North America has packed a powerful political punch for years. From the vitality of Idle No More to the Grand Slam court victories that have led powerful industries, at least held them, and made them pay, and laid pipeline protests to rest for good. Thomas Mueller is one of the many who trace its momentum to prophecies that foresaw Indigenous youth coming together to guide the older generations to a better world. This is what I feel is happening, where we see unprecedented alliances, even more elected leaders every day stepping forward to tell big oil no, under immense economic and political pressure. Indigenous peoples, with the support of their allies, as everybody else, have effectively kept the last private major oil reserve landlocked. We have effectively neutralized 20 or 30 of the world's biggest, most powerful corporations to ever exist in the history of humankind. The most recent example includes the freeze of construction, of course, in Dakota. It runs by sacred burial grounds, supplies water to Standing Rock Sioux tribe, of course. The totem pole, along with a group of Canadian First Nations delegates, have visited the reserve just last week to demonstrate with them in solidarity. Standing Rock Sioux are fighting a moral battle here. Reuben George, a manager of BC First Nations, a Sacred Trust initiative, which is dedicated to fighting Kinder Morgan's Trans Mountain expansion, followed the totem pole from Vancouver to Winnipeg, along with his 2 children. It was the 3rd time accompanying the annual totem pole journey. He said, being part of Standing Rock's protest was a deeply moving experience, especially while engaging in his own pipeline protest back home. you don't see or hear stories of what they're standing up against or what little resources they have. But they've really pushed to make our earth a better place to live. I was blown away by that, he explained. I think we're in very similar circumstances and similar in our approach. We're going to court. We're talking with federal government. We're suing them. We're winning. Those are in the guidelines of what the people wanted, and mainly what the elders told them to do. One of the nations has launched two court cases against Kinder Morgan Trans Mountain expansion. I told you about that years ago. Proposal to triple the capacity of an existing pipeline that ships hundreds of thousands of barrels of oil from Alberta to BC every day. One of them, claiming that the National Energies Review was unlawful, was dismissed by federal court Monday. Well, the ruling says the consultation process is ongoing and the cabinet will determine whether the Crown broached its duty to consult. George remains confident that his community, along with their allies, will be successful, that these projects will not go forward because they will not allow them to. We'll do what it takes to make sure it doesn't happen, he said. My people are going to do that, and that's probably one of the biggest things I got out of the tour that I was just on. The values coming from my people, where they want to stand and say no to money. In BC, they were offered money to allow it through, and everyone said no. It was unanimous. North American Alliance of Indigenous Peoples is incredible. First Nations chiefs across Canada are currently in the process of negotiating a nationwide new alliance that would require its participants to support one another no matter what in their respective battles against all energy projects. From the Mohawks and the Grand Chief of Ganasake, major opponent of this new $15.7 billion East Energy Pipeline, also negotiating with chiefs trying to bring Standing Rock Sioux tribe, North Dakota, into the partnership. I mean, this is all of Turtle Island. Now, some of the Mohawk chiefs are headed back to Standing Rock. They're going to bring a treaty to them. They're willing to be supporters at the same time. We'll be able to help them doing it together. It's inspiring because it's not only a Native issue here. We're seeing non-Natives who are joining on board across the United States and Europe. We're seeing a mobilization of humanity, not just First Nations, but the chiefs are expected to finalize their agreement later this month with a signing ceremony broadcast live that will reunite all the tribes on this continent in a way that has not been done or seen before. This changes everything. Everything. It's amazing what's going on here right now on this continent. That is bringing people together because they're thinking of sending this overseas and getting natives from every continent to sign it so that we fight together as a people, the new United Nations. I had said before that 2016 is the year that the deal with the devil comes due. I'm not talking about Lucifer, as you're told, or Satan, as we keep hearing about, satanic, Luciferian. Nah. Lucifer appears in literature. 17th century. In this tragical history of Dr. Faustus. This treatment of the Faust myth predates the more famous version. Tells the story a little differently. Basic contours of the story remain the same. That of a brilliant man who sells his soul to the devil in order to gain forbidden knowledge. The pact, he believes, will grant him some advantage in his life. The Faust myth resonates with this information age, this colonial takeover, as we surrender more and more and more of our sovereignty and our humanity, in fact, to technology, to science. You hear more and more, or you should, about the bargain, the deal. Science and technology, the pipelines, the agri-food, all of these things brought here by colonists who were raped into believing that. The things that have made people homophobic to a degree that is ridiculous. As if we wouldn't want men to be able to love, wouldn't want women to be able to love. Where we have judges saying to women, if you could keep your legs together, you wouldn't be raped. Where anonymous vigilantes spend more time in prison for exposing rapists than the rapists themselves. This is what is brought to us, and this is where I will continue when we get back. Welcome back, everybody. Can you hear me? Okay, good. So, listener supported, we can always use your help. 2016 has been a messed up year, hasn't it? I probably don't need to remind anyone of that, but it bears repeating anyway, because how's it been for you? Every time I think about 2016, or when I think it's done smacking me around, it gets another licking. But I can't really complain, given the endless ticker tape of terrible news coming from all around the world. So much so that it threatens to become routine now. All hell has not quite broken out everywhere yet. Not in the way it has in Syria, not in the way it has in the Ukraine, say. But it's only a matter of time. And I don't need to read the litany here. You're all smart people, you know what's going on out there. The Olympics, which was basically the Hunger Games, that beloved mashup of mostly obscure and unloved sports, and a high initiate ritual, didn't offer much relief. Brazil was rocked by political scandal and bad omen after bad omen. America's one-time great escape from reality, summer blockbuster, is slipping from its grasp. Studios focus on money and energy on the foreign markets. This is why nearly every movie title these days has a number or a colon in it. Notice that when you look at it, there's a reason. Even Hollywood has run out of material, even to recycle. Its competitors are catching up. Nothing but remakes, nothing but sequels as far as the eye can see. The repeat. Repeat and repeat. We have seen the same themes, haven't we? Over and over again. Because it all ties into another theme of this year, this theme of a planetary retrograde. I've taken advantage of all of these backsliding planets to recover a lot of things from my past. And in that regard, Stranger Things feels like a punctuation. It's the year of Stranger Things, isn't it? We have been seduced. We, all of us people, through science and technology and necromancy. The Western civilization saying it removed poverty and illiteracy and hunger and frequent and severe disease and short lifespan for the majority of people and created for them instead a relative affluence, an unproved health and medical care, longer life expectancy, a sense of increasing power, now appears to some groups to raise a general threat, the continuation of our species. Civilization, with its commitment to science and technology and industry. You might indeed understand why I call this the Faustian bargain. The story that people have heard of. Faust in Goethe's play brought a magical, secular, yes, but magical knowledge and power that he was compelled to use, and then had to proceed to the next experience, the next project, or be forever damned. It provides a really good analogy to some of the formulations of this current predicament. We do agree that mankind is involved in a process that probably cannot voluntarily and safely be stopped or permanently slowed down significantly, even if there are good arguments for doing so. But we maintain on that balance, and with some exceptions, that the arguments are heavily against deliberate policies to stop or slow down the basic long-term technological trend, even if it could be done safely. Indeed, we would prefer to accelerate some aspects of this while being prudent, careful, watchful, in order to prevent or reduce the impact of what is happening to us. People who suggest stopping or slowing this progress face several problems. The foremost is sheer political, economic, technological practicality of launching an effective campaign of this sort against an existing active opposition, and apathy. Most people would rather put their thumbs in their mouth and rock back and forth and close their eyes. It's hard to see how we are going to think our way out of this, is what I'm saying. Do we move to what seems desirable at this point, something post-industrial. Any concerted attempt to stop or slow progress is usually catastrophe prone. At the minimum, probably require a creation of an extraordinarily repressive government. Because that's where we are right now, everywhere in the world. I was reminded that this is Star Trek's 50th year. And it took a while, to put across a message I was trying to put across several years ago. But I think more and more people are starting to see this. That behind this disarming velvet glove of Star Trek's seductive techno-future, idealistic multiculturalism, is the iron fist of military, of a totalitarianism, of an expansionness, a imperialism. Because the Federation was ruled by an assembly and a high council, a very large number of whom seemed to be Starfleet admirals. The council reminds you very much of a democratic assembly, but more of a leadership that you would see in a rigid, hierarchical organization, like the Freemasons or the Jesuits. And we're seeing this all over the world. It's the same story. And under the smiley veneer of humanism, I guess, politically correct, pandering, New Deal-ish visage liberalism, the Federation certainly feels like a socialist military dictatorship. In best case scenario, that's what we're living under. The very core of the Federation, the core of Starfleet, is the presence of an expansionist philosophy. The Federation must grow to survive. It is Masonic. It is hierarchical. And these stories are all told exclusively from the point of view of an elite military officer on a spaceship armed with world-destroying arsenals. So when I say we are living in Faust, we have made the bargain. It's been made. We've made this bargain with technology, and as our honeymoon ends, and I think it's ending, and the disruption and destruction that technology causes via industry, via the new communities, to identify itself continues to mount. We're seeing it with the rise of robotics, artificial intelligence, the new 5G, which is dangerous. I have an article up on that. Not to mention surveillance state, the drone warfare in the poor UK. I weep for you guys. What's coming for you guys is nasty, nasty, nasty. With prominent figures like Stephen Hawking and Elon Musk are sounding the alarm, warning humanity's very survival is at risk, and they're still only seeing that tip of an iceberg because they too have an agenda. But I guess it's too late now. We can't turn back now. The pact has been signed. At the same, we've seen the rise of scientism, a new religion that claims science is the answer to every question, that all of humanity's other pursuits and beliefs should be subordinate to it, because science is the only method we have to determine what is real and what is true. that art and religion and philosophy and indeed every activity in which humans interact and communicate should be placed under science thumb, which the real world ends up setting something like a Soviet-like old school committee to inquire into every human activity that had not been legally prohibited. Scientism is perhaps the most darkest, deepest, real satanic philosophy the world has ever seen, for reasons that I think I'll make clear. Science has become the good substitute for God. God, which that idea was brought from somewhere else. Wherever you live, the God you probably worship has not anything to do with what your ancestors worshipped. But believers in the science tech progress tend to be happier than the religious faithful, says newest studies. Religious believers tend to be happier than non-religious folks, according to a long line of psychological research. Science has suggested several possible explanations for this phenomenon, including ideas that religion offers a greater sense of control, provides a purpose, reduces uncertainty, because it tells you what to do. Researchers concluded that both belief in scientific technology, progress, and religion are positively associated with life satisfaction. Yet the association with belief in scientific technology and progress is a little bigger. You feel a little better. In fact, little satisfaction was 3 times more likely to correlate with a belief in science tech progress than in religious doctrine. Must be true, right? Science says so. I mean, these people ran scientific, psychological survey that was in no way biased or weighted towards a conclusion, right? That's not how science works, right? It's hilarious what people end up believing in. Because the problem with science is that so much of it simply isn't. Last summer, the Open Science Collaboration announced that it had tried to replicate 150 published psychological experiments sampled from 3 of the most prestigious journals in the field. Scientific claims all rest on the idea that experiments repeated under identical conditions would yield identical results. But until very recently, no one bothered to check in a systematic way whether this was actually the case. Well, that just happened. And as a matter of fact, they couldn't reproduce any of them. Scientific claims rest on these ideas that are supposed to be hard, fast, undeniable. But they're a lie. They're an absolute lie. Studies that originally reported positive results 85% failed to show any statistical significance on replication. So, psychological science is rife with fraud. That can be true of the other sciences, not the real sciences, right? In science, the irreproducible is a quiet crisis. Evidence of this crisis is mounting. A growing chorus of researchers worry that far too many findings of any top research journal cannot actually be reproduced. There's a huge wellspring of awareness that a lot of biomedical research, specifically, is not strongly predictive. They use a lot of fancy words saying they made stuff up and it can't be scientifically repeated. People eventually become aware because there's a wake of silence after a false positive result. The same is true in every field of science, from neuroscience to stem cells to what we're using in our cars, what we're using in our shoes, everything. Science is in crisis, like the planet. One has become so wrong that mainstream media has been forced to pay attention to it. And it takes a club over the head to get that to happen. Increased competition for funding, maybe, has led science to drift from an emphasis on rigorous, reproducible research to something flashy, impact studies, which in some cases have been subsequently found to be wrong, like we're seeing with the oils and the mining happening all over the world. When they say something is safe, it ain't. And it's led to another crisis in which any credibility of scientific findings needs to be questioned. In combination with these trends, if it has not led to a loss of public confidence in science, I don't know what will. But it creates a vicious cycle. Should undermine everything they tell us. If that happens, though, society will lose its most powerful tool to negotiate in what lies ahead. Flashy, highly impact studies, which in some cases have been wrong. Or, if I was nicer, I would say exaggerated. If you read the science news carefully, it's pretty much all you see these days. I looked at this phenomenon a while back. The outrageous headline tailored to social media, which is always accompanied by big walk back buried at the bottom, preferably below a bunch of pop-up ads. They rely on the short attention span of the readers, and it's working. Most simply catch the flashy headline on their iPhones and go about their daily business, sharing it, saying this is the truth, I've just found it, and not bothering to read any of it. But they are secure in the knowledge that the machine is humming nicely, that the great arc moves ever forward, that hard times will be over soon. It's all a lie. More and more serious thinkers are sounding the alarm that the age of miracles is over, that all the low-hanging fruit has been plucked, that Easy Street is coming to an end, Some call what I'm looking at as the Great Stagnation. Scientism, techno-hype are in fact desperate tactics to divert attention to that brick wall looming in the immediate distance. Flashy, high-impact studies, which in some cases have been made up. It's getting worse. The high is getting more naked, more desperate. It's actually worrying. You know, some recent miracle stories that you may have seen on your live Facebook feed, who is actually controlled by a computer program, which is an AI, they admit it, called Prism. Ready, set, think. Mind-controlled drones race to the future. Wow, that's amazing, right? Oh, wait. Here's how the technology delivers an abstract thought through a digital realm into real life. Each EEG headset is calibrated to identify the electrical activity associated with particular thoughts in the wearer's brain. Recording, for example, neuron firings when the wearer images or imagines pushing a chair across the floor. Programmers write code to translate these imaginary motion signals into commands that the computer sent to drones. Programmers write code to translate these signals. WTF. Okay, I get it. This is brought to you by the number 33 and the letters B and S. Never happened, didn't happen, not true. This is a direct drone to Vulcan my mend headline. Promises all of it. This is more EEG brainwave stuff, the kind of thing that we've been seeing at least in the early 90s and probably before. It's basically a virtuoso version of the old baking soda and vinegar volcano. But wait, what's the miracle? Autofocus contact lens may soon become reality. Wow, that's amazing, but wait for a minute. The marketer admits that he's working on a prototype of an autofocus lens, and it's still 5 to 10 years away. He says it is a very challenging project. You need to get turnable lenses, a power supply, drive the lenses, and the electronics, and everything you need. Well, it needs to be flexible. So 5 to 10 years in scientists is about half past never. How do I know this? Because I'm still waiting on about 1,000 things, the techno miracles that were promised back in the 80s. None of which has happened. Then there's this. Why Scientific American prediction from 10 years ago were wrong. So recently, an experiment was done. I took outdated issues of respected popular science magazines. Scientific American, people like that one. Researched exactly what happened to the highly touted breakthroughs of an era that supposedly were going to change everything. What I discovered is just how terrible we are at predicting the long arc of scientific discovery. 10 years ago, someone or somebody's law of everlasting wonderfulness was surely fixed all that by now. So let's see. New technology may beat memory bottleneck. Plain old silicon. Wow, that's amazing, but wait. Don't go and dump your SSD quite yet. Even just confirming all of this will take years. Still, it seems clear enough that the memory problem has a solution. If not this, then one of a number of alternative avenues for something nanoscale and non-volatile, meaning blah, blah, blah. Oh my God, right? If you ever read such or heard such BS in your life, I have, because I've been following these guys for 30 years or so. DARPA, investigating a self-mutating vaccine to take down all viruses. That too sounded amazing, but wait, we're years away from this being feasible. A feasible solution in humans? No. Early results encouraging. Engineer TIPs, reducing viral loads in cultured cells. Yeah. The next step would be animal. They're not there yet. It's quite possible the whole idea will fall down there long before it enters a first in-man study. We're years away. As a matter of fact, the whole idea will fall down. So what's the point? You're probably saying, Tracey, what are you trying to say? The point is keeping this late Soviet model science worship machine on the road. Well, it's obviously popping some gaskets, leaking some fluids, or at least it's complete BS. How about flaming bags of dog caca? Well, there's a one-stop shop for that. The transhumanistic superstore forever exists. Secrets to immortality uncovered. Wow, that's amazing. Tell me more. I read that headline. Transhumanist scientists are deeply working on how to knock out those genes, which are leading to age-related problems. Well, this is less complicated by adding a new piece of DNA. However, deciding which gene to knock out would be a riddle. Deciding which gene to knock out would be a riddle. The translation of that is, the secrets to immortality have not been uncovered. Don't worry though, because humans will become immortal cyborgs by 2050. Expert predicts. Wow, amazing. But wait. Dr. Pearson says by 2050, science will be able to connect their brains directly to computers and move their minds into an improved android body. This would allow people to have multiple existences, multiple identities, carry on living long after their biological death. What's exciting is that it no longer will need nature, which is forcing changes on us. But this will be our own breakthroughs. But wait, none of this technology is anywhere close to existing. I mean, nowhere. This is, again, snake oil. The myth that human progress is on this straight curve upward from curves to the stars comes from people that say evolution may have sped up after humans cut their foods or cut up their foods. Wow, that's amazing. Researchers have determined that the development of stone tools used to cut up raw meat made people smarter. They use words like determined. Based on what? Based on personal experience? How is this science? Sounds like a bunch of bros smoking something they probably shouldn't be smoking and saying, you know what, I think because I cut my food, I'm smarter. Here's the chestnut. Variations keep popping up regularly. Scientists zapped mouse brains with lasers to bring them back lost memories. Wow, it's amazing, but fascinating result. Brain zapping lasers probably won't be able to be treated. You can't treat memory loss with it. Scientists begin, and they talk and they talk and they talk, and they sound like they've actually done it until you read that the actual experiment was almost orthodox Pavlov. I guess was funding review time, because they lied. They're not zapping their brains. Scientists claiming they can create babies without men injecting eggs with artificial sperm. Wow, we don't need men. But guess what? That too was a lie. And if you take the time to read the whole article, you find out, no. It's one of those stories that isn't even news. It ended up being about male infertility. A similar story showed up National Geographic 12 years ago. The end of males. Remember hearing that? Mouse made to reproduce without sperm dads. In the mammalian branch of the animal kingdom, are often left out of the loop when it comes to progeny. After the initial combination of sperm, they are excluded from pregnancy. But after all, even after birth, when nurturing falls to mom, that is not true. If men are around, they're needed. They're needed even if they're not around. So Japanese science has streamlined reproduction even further. They've eliminated fathers entirely. Experiments and questions here deal with parthenogenesis, which I've talked about, and giving the lack of repeatability. You can't repeat this in science, basically. You can't really prove it. We are not getting rid of males. When I go through the things that I've read and things that are supposed to happen, and you find out all of your little flash note new science drama that's on Facebook, Prism has decided what you would like to see and tailors headlines for what the majority of you and your friends would enjoy seeing. The case against science now is straightforward. Much of the literature, maybe half, maybe more, is just a lie. Afflicted by studies with very small samples, like 2 people, tiny effects, invalid analysis, conflicts of interest, together with an oppression or obsession for pursuing whatever is fashionable at the time and whatever backs whoever's funding the study. So do you still want a priest of temples of the Sphinx world where science dictate what is and what is not true? The fact that scientism is a ruling or classic circle the wagons maneuver, a symptom that science is in fact in crisis. The age of wonder is over. This is the same prediction from the 1900s, thrown up in protest. But that was entirely a different world, right? one without multi-billion science laboratories in every major country in the world. When scientific journalists wrote 20 years ago of the end of science, and recently took stock of his predictions and found them to be held up quite nicely, our descendants will learn much more about nature. They will invent gadgets even cooler than smartphones, but their scientific version of reality will resemble ours for two reasons. First, ours is in many respects true. Most new knowledge will be merely extended, will fill in current maps of reality rather than forcing anything new or anything relevant or anything radical or a new revision. Second, some of the remaining mysteries, where did the universe come from, how did life really begin, how does a chunk of meat make a mind, might be unsolvable. So far my predictions would be no great revelations, no great revolutions, no insights into nature as cataclysmic as the earth is round, evolution, quantum mechanics, relativity, the Big Bang. Nothing's really new. In some ways, science is even in worse shape today than I would have guessed in the 90s. In the end of science, an old article predicted that scientists, as they struggle to overcome their limitations, would become desperate to prove anything to make money. This trend has become severe, widespread. AI, algorithms, we're hearing so much about them these days. They're the new game changer. So where's the reality? Complex algorithm research, development, harder than many think. They are usually quite difficult to develop, often take longer than experience with other software projects would tell you. True research projects, which something is mathematical or logical, takes years. Silicon Valley didn't save the world. They act like it. What we were told was going to change the world may have changed it, may have made us stupider. If the robust economic process in the first half of the century helped create something national, a mood of optimism and faith, this is over now. Techno-utopia is always going to be about one guy in control. Always. The paralyzed can still not walk. The blind cannot see. The human genome was decoded, one post-Golden Quarter triumph, I guess, nearly 15 years ago. We're still really waiting to see any benefit. A true benefit. Not a fake article, but a real one. At the time, they were confident it would be a decade away. That's 10 years. We still have dementia. We still don't know how to create chronic condition. There is no green revolution. We still drive steel cars powered by a burning petroleum spirit, or worse, diesel. There are no new real materials. Physics seems to have ground to a halt. Nobody has been to the moon for 42 years. And so the question is asked, what happened to tomorrow? Why has the train stopped? I ask what got the train started in the first place. Did it start in the dying embers of World War II? Oh yes, it did. I have an idea, but I guarantee no one's going to like it. Because the only thing that seems to really drive us, is death. A smoking gun. A new disaster. We could blame the oil companies for all this problem, the mining companies, the big corporations, but we work for them. It's not, they don't have robots. Well, they have kind of robots. They're robots that suck a little bit. Not the really cool robots that I was hoping we'd have. We have terrorism. We have false flags. We have war. And that's what we really do. False flag terror. Compelling people to war. And then there are new things, mostly better guns, to kill us faster. Prime ministers, presidents, congressmen, generals, spooks, soldiers, police admit. They all admit to false flag. Government officials, which carry out an attack, admit it in writing, or say it, or take their own photographs or their videos. We know this is true. We know it's true. And so obvious, you know. When this feast of 9/11 regurgitation came up, and everyone I heard was talking about it on the 11th. All it proves to me is that people have gotten really, really slow. Well, Brazil is actually in trouble right now after the Hunger Games. I guess the capital decided to put down its boots. Their former president is now impeached. But they waited for the Hunger Games to be over. That was very thoughtful. You know what you think? I look around this world and I see the same thing being done to the same people over and over again. And people are still raving about Trump. Trump! His success stories. He's the best businessman in the world. Have you read about him for 5 minutes, people? He bought Trump Plaza, $400 million. It was repossessed by the bank. He bought his yacht, $29 million, repossessed by the bank. 4 casinos, $3 billion. Filed for bankruptcy, went out of business, stiffed his contractors, stiffed his employees, started Trump Airlines, made no profit. The helicopters were repossessed by Citibank. Trump Mortgage, Trump Vodka, Trump Steaks, all went out of business. You think that a billionaire is going to go on a TV show? No, they own the station. Have we become that blind? Are we that slow and stupid? Like, I can't believe that I'm still hearing people rave about him. Am I alone? Am I alone here? Oh my God. The bravest thing that we've seen on your continent is when a bunch of, I'm sorry, white men, that's what they were, dressed up as Mohawks to pretend to be brave. They couldn't even do it themselves. They couldn't be guys walking down from their Masonic Lodge in Boston. Third generation, Scottish, Irish. Willamar Meager Tweed, known as Boss Tweed, American politician, most notable for being the corrupt boss, Grand Sachem of the Columbian Order, the Tammany Society, democratic political machine that played a major role in politics of the 19th century, New York City and state. At the height of its influence, Tweed was the third largest landowner in New York City, director of Erie Railroad, 10th National Bank, the New York Printing Company, as well as a proprietor of Metropolitan Hotel, the Society of Tammany, or Columbian Order, fraternal, patriotic, benevolent society founded in New York City. This is what they call it. In its 1789 Constitution, St. Tammany Society in New York identified itself as this, Columbian Order, St. Tammany Society, thus acknowledging two patrons, Tammany and Christopher Columbus, Columbian Order. Tammany was, they call him an Indian king, but I'm not sure. At least 1644, 1718, when William Penn first came here, or settled in Delaware Valley. As far as I know, we've never had a king, but they still called them that. A king of any kind. He might have been a chief. But at the time, Philadelphia was established 1682, depending. His court was in town. He was friendly to Penn. He lived amongst the first settlers for some time, and until old age. The people later sainted him and kept his day, believe it or not. I don't know how he got them to do it. But the Society of Tammany, or the Columbian Order, is a secret Masonic fraternal order based on something called the Red Man Secret Order. The order itself claims direct descendants of the Sons of Liberty, noting that the Sons participated in the Boston Tea Party, dressed as natives, Mohawks. So this man was probably the first pretendian. So we are no longer seduced by your science and your things. Let's take this land back. What do you think, guys? Thanks for listening today.